But a true narcissist definitely has multiple, internal personalities, and it definitely is detached. There's psychopaths and sociopaths, and are both narcissists and narcissists. So there's it's definitely a kind of a disorder, and they're not going to change, and they're not going to get better.
Today we are speaking with Barbara Bowman. She is the author of What Not to Do at Funerals. Barbara, could you please introduce yourself and let people know just a little more about you, please?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for sharing your audience with me and take some time to talk about one of my passions, which is all these faux pas and lack of decorum and things that have really caused problems in people's lives and families over something as common as funeral, death, and grieving. I have had a lot of these in my life. Most of my family members, my parents, my siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, my own son, my dogs have all passed. And so I've had a lot of experience with that. And at the same time, because I've had a lot of experience in my regular life where I work in a med spa, I'm a med spa, where we do like skin treatments on folks and we get kind of personal. I am an easy conduit for people to say, "Hey, guess what happened at my funeral, or not my funeral, but the funeral of my mother or my brother? Could you believe this? I can't believe this happened." And so over and over again, I said I should write a book about this and just help people out, and not to make it heavy, not to make it sad, not for it to be a trigger for anyone, but just as a simple guide to kind of, in a lighthearted way, just answer some of those basic questions so it's not going to be awkward or weird anymore. And if you do screw up, there's some simple ways to repair those relationships. And I thought was important. And it's now a passion.
Well, death is hard to deal with for a lot of people because of that emotional track that is attached to it. It's always devastating and it happens at the wrong time. And, when we're young, it can really be grievous. So it's awesome to have somebody out there trying to help you through this. I've had several of those funerals myself. And, when you start burying your brothers and all of that, it gets pretty traumatic at times. Am I next? That's the big question. So, what is the big takeaway from your book? I mean, how is this thing written, and does it walk you through each of the phases going through the funeral, or what is the book about?
A little bit. The book's actually written kind of punchy. There's a little bit of tongue in cheek in it. Not that death or grieving at all is not a serious matter, but it's in a large part written for people who have not been on that side of grieving. And grief is something that once you experience it, you're always going to have grief in your life. You can experience different levels of grief depending on the relationship of the person that's passed that you have. It's always going to be different. I mean, it is. People don't realize how serious it is when someone loses a long-term pet if you're not a pet lover, but you have to honor that. And it's very different type of grief if you have a grandparent or someone who's been ill for an exceptional amount of time, as opposed to something that's happened suddenly, where there was no expectation, where there's been an accident or suicide. And these are all have their own type of trauma. And if someone doesn't have a platform of how to kind of respond to that, they can really destroy relationships, and they can end up making what can be a very serious or supportive um, ceremony and turn it into to be about them. And that is the worst thing you can do. So it's very direct and to the point. You know, what do you do when someone dies? What's the first thing you do when you find out someone's passed that you know? You know, um, you you send a card. I don't care if that person's been like deceased for 4 or 5 years. If you just found out and they or someone you had a relationship with or meant something to you, um, you send that family a card because that person will live forever in their lives. You know, um, some people don't want to go to funerals because it makes them queasy, and so we discussed that. Basics, real basics, like what not to wear, what to wear. Um, these, you know, there's been some. I have some. There's been some really fun topics that have come up, and um, oddly enough, the same basic questions come up every time.
So it's kind of interesting that what to wear at a funeral, because it's kind of odd our day and time now. People may not necessarily think about that, but you don't want to go to a funeral dressed like you're going to Walmart, do you?
Oh, but people do, and it's definitely seen and it's definitely remembered. I have, you know, for the most part, especially since COVID, and I'm a bit older, but I think COVID kind of did a number and on folks kind of forgetting what some of the normalities we had around what would happen when someone died all kind of got blown out of the water. And there's a lot of people who are millennial age, maybe in their early 30s, who are just now experiencing a death in their family. And so to them, they're thinking, should I make a statement? We don't. We wear blacks now at a wedding. We didn't wear black at weddings before. Why should I have to wear black? Um, there's a lot of these kind of strange questions, but you have to remember, especially in America, we have a lot of different religions and a lot of different beliefs. And it's in other countries they have a main religion and main ceremonies that people have done for decades. It's part of their national culture, and we kind of don't have that anymore. And especially since the church population has dwindled so much, it's still even more of a loss. And so there have been people that have wore cocktail dresses because it was black, but it was also shiny and cut down to their belly button. So not appropriate. There was one instance, though, I will say, and I wrote about it in the book. Most of them tend to be serious. You want to dress like you're going to a job interview or you're meeting your significant other parents for the first time. Something conservative, something respectful. Doesn't always have to be darker. But I did have a friend who, it was a formal memorial service for her mom, who was an avid gardener. And so the daughters all wore these bright sundresses. And that was in respect for their mom. Anyone else who wore something like that was considered out of place and inappropriate because it was the memorial service. So that was, people come in and they say, well, I knew her, so I'm gonna wear something that I think represents the way she would dress. Well, it's not about how you would represent her. It's about supporting the family. So there's a lot of situations. Yeah. And just real quick, one more. I have another where a gentleman, and he worked in the city, and they worked on the roads. They have what we call a wake. A wake is usually open to the public, and just anybody and everybody who wants to can usually attend a wake. And they may go on for 4 or 5 hours. And this gentleman worked with him on the job. He came after work in his muddy work boots and his bright orange, those neon orange shirts you wear when you're working on the road, and came in and sat next to the family. And this woman came into my office and she was mortified. She said, this guy couldn't have put a decent pair of shoes muddied shoes all the way down through the funeral parlor. He couldn't have put an extra pair of shoes in his truck. He couldn't have gone home. We were there for 4 hours. What was wrong with this guy? And that was the first thing she told me when the week after the funeral. It stuck with her that was the guy was lazy and disrespectful, probably there just for the free food.
Yeah. Another thing, Barbara, is people need to think for themselves during this time and not lean in on the family necessarily, because they have their minds full. So what to wear, you don't want to reach out to the family and say, hey, what should I be wearing? You should have that emotional intelligence, emotional support, for the family. And a lot of people, they don't have that.
Yeah, it's not like people don't have a television where they haven't seen things. They don't. But you could always call these things always take place at a location. Even if it's a celebration of life, which could happen anywhere, um, or if it's at a particular church or synagogue. If you're not sure, you just call the funeral director, or you call that church or that location. They'll know. They'll know what's going to happen in the ceremony, and they're going to know what to wear, and things like that. There's always someone you can call. You don't have to call a family member and drag them down with more details.
Yeah, this kind of why I think it's critical that people understand, and if they don't, get your book, because I've performed a few of these funerals myself, and you know, the last funeral I did was for my cousin, and I ended up putting him in the back of my truck and took him from Klamath Falls all the way over the mountain in a pickup truck instead of the hearse. The family at that time, they couldn't afford the services, so I stepped in and said, "Hey, let's do this, and I'll put him in my truck. That'll save you expense there." And it's really about supporting the family and getting it done.
You are so right. And let me just give you kudos. I think that was a really nice thing for you to do. And it was very thoughtful, and it took a lot of weight off of them. And it showed how much you cared about him, and that you performed as you just said, here, I can pick up the slack here. I see a need. I'm gonna meet it. And you know, I don't know you, but that's a level of character and kindness that is hard to find these days. But that's exactly what you need to do. Feel like, well, I don't know what to do. And one of the hardest things that you can say to a family, because as you know, when someone dies, it's a ton of work. It's so much work. It's exhausting, and you might get a very short amount of time to deal with all their effects. Um, you may not even know but you might end up having a funeral or some type of service before you even completely know, you know, the full story around the death. There's a lot of things that happen that are exhausting, and there's a lot of PTSD that happens just to make ends meet, just to make details happen. So if you're a neighbor or you're a friend, I wish everyone acted like you. I wish they said, you know what, I'm just going to go mow their lawn. I'm not going to ask them, just going to mow their lawn. I'm just going to drop off some food. If they don't eat it, they don't like it, they don't answer the door, I don't care. Just going to drop it off. Um, if it's a relative who dies suddenly or something and they have to go out of town, you know, one example I leave is if you're their friend, you should instantly become the best Uber driver in the world at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because it may be a small inconvenience for you to take someone to the airport so they can get across country for a funeral they didn't expect. But it is so much harder for them, because they're not going to Disney World. They're going to do something they had no expectation of doing. So coming up and saying, just taking a minute, just taking a beat and say, what might I need right now? And then just doing it for them. And if I know you have to go to your aunt's house Can I watch your kids for you during that time? I'll change my schedule. Or I have some time. Can I watch your kids during that time? I'd really appreciate it, an opportunity to do that. Just that's an offer. Um, and to take it one step further, I think the best friend and support person is the one that shows up a week, 2 weeks, or a month later. That if your friend, maybe they've been through quite a few funerals, or if it was someone who they knew was going to pass, and so many things had already been laid out and prepared, and you say, hey, if they say truly we've taken it all down, we have it all put together, we don't need any help. We'll check in a week or two later. Show up again. Show up then with some food, or take them out. Say, hey, can we do lunch? You don't have to talk about anything. I just want to give you either a good time, or maybe some time to just blow off some grief that you're now experiencing that you couldn't experience the 2 weeks earlier, when every bit of energy you're using is to deal with the funeral and all of that. You know, that's when a lot of the grief really happens, is a week or two later, or starts.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a really interesting question, because everybody grieves differently and we process it out differently. And sometimes that can actually take several years, if a wife loses a husband or whatever. So that support system after, and the longevity of that support, I really think that matters. And how do we determine if the person is okay and we can stop supporting them in this situation?
You don't. I think being able to get back to regular life, and by that, that's your new normal, your new regular life, really does depend on who passed. Sometimes it is if a parent was your best friend and your parent, well, you have two relationships you're going to grieve. If it was a long-term spouse, I think, and a child, I think that there is grief that you'll always have, and that's okay. And I think it's totally okay to be, I'm grieving a little bit right today over my son, or my dad who died 5 years ago. Or you may always feel sad for a little bit, and you can always be supportive. Um, and I think the way you can do that is never be afraid to talk about the person that died. I have a friend who really was not there for me when my son passed, and I was shocked by that. And when you have one of these monumentous experiences of grief and loss, not just a work colleague or a high school or college friend, but or a neighbor, but something much more significant, you'll really find out who the people are in your life who are going to be there or not there. It does put a line in the sand. And yet this woman, who was very unsupportive, she just kind of checked out. She has never forgotten my son's birthday, ever. She continues to call him. She says, hey, and it's in her calendar. And every year she'll call me up and we'll talk for a few minutes about my son. And I think I'm always going to grieve the loss of his life that I could have had with him. But knowing that there's people around who will just maintain the fun, wonderful parts of their relationship and their personality, it's it's the most wonderful thing in the world.
Yeah. My mother lost my oldest brother when he was 16, and I was just a child at the time, but I watched my mother and my father take that to the grave with them. So that grieving, it happens differently, and it happens lifelong, because there's an attachment there, especially if it's a son or a daughter. someone very close like that. Uh, what's the best way to help people like that? Uh, because, we all want to say, how can I help you? But how do we help?
Yeah. You can't. Well, I think in some of those situations, there's a lot you can't do other than allow them to grieve. Um, and to grievers out there, I have experienced grief with and without grief support and very specific grief counseling, and I can tell you it is night and day. If there are people, and they would, a few decades ago, grief counseling or grief groups was just so few and far between. And if you had insurance, insurance wouldn't cover that sort of thing. But what a difference when you go through this horrible kind of like Jumanji world. Your whole world is upside down now. Nothing is going to be the same. No future situation is going to be the same. No Christmas, no birthdays, no holidays are going to be the same because your brother's gone. Now, if you are speaking with other people who are going through that, you'll be able to find some kind of normalcy. Like I'm not going crazy that I still cry over this. I'm not going crazy that I still feel this loss, even though I have these other kids. I I can't say enough about professional support in those days where your body just can't maybe get out of bed or get out of a chair, and you have a support person that says, "Yeah, I remember that day. Tomorrow will be different." Um, and I would, and I think feeling like you can't talk about it or feeling like you can't take a moment to grieve and be sad, or you have to leave the other room because it's going to make people uncomfortable. I think that's really hard. Um, but it is something we have to do. Unfortunately, those of us who have had or are dealing with severe grief have to do a little bit of counseling, whether we like it or not, to the people around us um, who have not and may never experience what we're going through. And to just tell them, yeah, I'm going to have moments where I'm just really sad. Certain songs may help me feel better, certain songs may make me feel bad, but I'm always going to feel bad because I love them. Just tell them I'm always going to miss them. I'm always going to love them, and most of the time I'm happy thinking of them. But every once in a while I'm going to be sad, or and I hope you're okay with that. You're not going to ruin everyone's dinner. You're not going to ruin all of Christmas. But if your mom has a few moments where she's thinking about your brother, let her have it. Just go, yeah, I know he's still here. If you believe that's your belief, say, why would he miss a Christmas with the family? If you believe, that there's angels or spirits, or if you have a belief that they have contact with us, then I would believe that your brother is there every single time because it's his family and he is invested.
Yep. Yep. I like that a lot. So I really think that you touched on something very important. Uh, it doesn't even really have to be a counselor, but a group of individuals that experienced a similar situation. That's relation. It's they can relate to you a lot better than most people. We have no clue how you feel. So having that support system is vital. And I think if my mother and my father would have found that type of support, it would have helped change the dynamics in our family long term. So I like that you encourage that.
And you can't get that from social media.
Right.
You cannot get that from social media. Someone might be speaking about their loss or their grief or what their steps in the grieving process were like, and that may resonate with you, but it also might make you feel, well, I'm not experiencing what they're experiencing, so what's wrong with me? So, it has its place, but it's and you can't relate to this either. But it's kind of like being pregnant. If you were pregnant and you were the only person around that was pregnant, you wouldn't have anyone to say, what does this feel like? How is this now? What does it do? You know, this is, I mean, you can't experience that. So, but this is why there's these types of groups. The only caveat I have is that there have been some, I've been in some groups that I've gotten out of fairly quickly, because you also don't want to use it as a group where there's some people, I'll put it this way, that feel that, for at least for a time, that if they're not sad or angry, that maybe they didn't love them as much as they thought they did. That in being sad and being depressed and shutting people out and carrying that, that intensity with them is somehow honoring that deceased. And not let, and the fear that if you let go of that, you'll forget them. Or people won't think you love them as much. And, that's one of the things that a good group will help someone navigate through, and say, you can be angry and you can be sad, but that doesn't change anything. That doesn't change your grief or your love for them. But what it does do is it doesn't allow other people to love you or come close to you. And it doesn't allow you to love other people. And in my particular opinion, just my opinion, that is, in a way, the opposite of what any one of our loved ones would want for us. I think, even if, whether people believe in the afterlife or not, there's all these fellas and gals that do this, talk to the dead, or whatever. Or when people see birds, or they see, they have dreams of their loved ones. No one's ever upset. No one's ever mad at them. No one's ever holding any grudge. Every single time, I've yet to hear of even one story where someone passed and didn't want more than anything for their loved ones on earth to be happy, that they're okay. And I would never want anyone to be sad all the time because my life was over. And I know that my son and my family are like, hey, please don't be upset. I would make them feel so bad to think that my life, I'm unable to love anyone again because my heart is so broken and I'm so empty. That would grieve them. And I refuse to upset them as much as I can. But I will cry and I'll get upset and I'll be sad for a moment. But I'm kind of determined to love a little more, because those are hands that can't, or give a little more in service, because those are hands that can't now in the tangible physical way that I can. But in groups also, I have to say that the VA has some of the best groups. If someone is lucky enough to be part of the VA or a TAP situation, Tragedy Assistance for Survivors, these people have long-term group relationships with other people who have grieved and lost their children and loved ones, and they find they always have an out with someone who'll understand what they're going through. That's a great relief.
I like that a lot. I think it's very important that people actually speak to one another about the possibility and the release before we die. I talk to my wife all the time and tell her, look, I really don't want you to be sad. I want you to be happy. I want you to find another person to be with. Whether you don't have to remarry, but find someone to help you get through life. It's important. So I don't know how many people actually take the time to speak with their loved ones about this, and I think it comforts them a little in case that happens. There's no expectations here. You have to be who you are and carry on.
You do, and I think the folks who don't have that conversation probably have a real just fear of death. and a lot of anxiety of what would happen afterwards. Um, and but that is a true love of someone else. If you believe that part of your relationship is to care for that person, to make sure they're cared for, that they're protected, physically, emotionally, spiritually, that's part of your job as that union of marriage. Then if you weren't able to do that, you would want to make sure that they found someone that could do that for them. And I think it's always important to say, I feel this is my job and I love you this way. And I know that I would want someone else to pick up where I left off and making sure that you're cared for. And sometimes that can even be, a child, or a brother or a sister, depending on the age of the family member. If they're in their 80s, they may not, but at that point, you have to make sure with your kids ahead of time what's going to happen to mom or what would happen to dad, because at some point, it's not too common that spouses die at the same time. And though they may not be able to or want to have a new intimate relationship with the opposite, get married again and such, but they will be alone for a time. And it's important for the family, I believe, very important for the family, to have made that decision and have them talk amongst themselves and know what they're going to do and what that plan is before one or the other parent passes, because that just takes all the pressure off. Because if one of them had died suddenly, let's say they're both in their 80s or something, and one dies suddenly, these are discussions that people start to panic. I don't want to take them in. How am I going to do it? What is this going to happen? How would this work? And it can really overshadow what's happening at the funeral, because now they're having these conversations in a moment of duress, when they never should have had these conversations in a moment of duress and stress and grief. And so now a lot of wires are going to get crossed. People will say things that they probably may not have said if they had time to think about it. So it's really good to plan. I mean, I'm planning. I'm working on my own playlist, because I know by the time I pass, no one's going to know any of the music that I like.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly my point there. The more that we can do before we go, it really helps alleviate the pain and suffering that they're going to have. It's going to happen. You're going to cry. You're going to get out of shape, and you just don't know when that's going to hit. Sometimes you get through the funeral and everything's fine. And then crash. So people, they do things differently and they respond differently. We should prepare for them.
One thing I kind of in that vein, and circling back to something else that you said about how people grieve differently, and also how this can incorporate with if you're a friend of someone who's grieving. This is a general statement. Okay. In general, I've seen that men grieve very differently than women. There's a difference in the way that a lot of men grieve. And it may have a lot to do with their upbringing and where they grew up. But I don't see as many women doing runs and hikes and physical challenges to honor that person. I just need to do something physical, something tangible that I can say, I did that. And I see a lot of that with men. And I honor that. And I feel if you're a friend of someone, that is an option. You can say, hey, would you like to, have you thought about doing a memorial run or a motorcycle run or a hike or a sponsorship for something or a plaque of some kind? Have you thought about, memorializing his life in some way? And that's not a bad conversation a little bit after. If you have especially if it's a friend, if someone loses a friend, let their guy friends, instead of just going through having their own little celebration of life where they pass do shots together, which is something you do not do at a funeral or memorial service, but might have a separate, celebration of life in your own group. That's something as a group can do. Now, I don't find that so often with women, and that's totally okay. But if you're the spouse of uh, uh, and your husband has lost a best friend or a brother or someone, suggest that to them. Say, hey, maybe I can help get your guys together. You guys can do something special, and do it for a couple years out. Do something, and that allows them an avenue to put their energies um, to grieve. And when they have to compartmentalize to support other people or go to work, and they have to sometimes shut down some of those feelings, and that takes a lot of energy. But if they can bring them out in another form, that's pretty healthy. And it's definitely honoring, and it brings other people together. And who wouldn't want that in their lives?
Yeah, that's more of a positive energy, and that's what you really need to tap into during that time. Get out of that negative energy and tap into something positive. Barbara, you are writing another book, or have you already published it? Could you talk to us about that?
Sure. Well, since I seem to like to talk about awkward subjects, I am writing another small. It's small. It'll be similar, and probably this is only like $60. They can get it on. 60 pages. They can get it on Amazon. They can download it because it is a guide. The second one is also a guide, but it's called "Getting Out: A Tactical Guide to Escaping Narcissism." So it's written in a style like I read a survival guide that a ex-military man put together on how to survive out in the wilderness. And so that's the style that it's written in, as if you're reading a tactical guide to survival.
Right on. So what brought this? It's such a contrast to the first. What brought this into fruition?
Well, one thing that happened when I was thinking about writing the What Not to Do at Funerals book was that so much out there about grief was either a trigger to my own grief, or was just about grieving or how to know you're grieving. And it was, most of us kind of down. And similar to these books on narcissism, which is now a little bit over 10% of the population, hard stop, it's kind of scary. They were also about, the PTSD of coming out of a relationship, how to recognize a narcissist, and all the psychological stuff. And they're kind of a downer too. And I have been in two, I hate to say it, two very different type of narcissist relationships. And I just wanted some hands-on practical stuff. Can you just tell me what to do? Can you tell me how not to get an attorney? How how maybe to get money away? What are some tangible things that I can do a little bit at a time to regain my sense of self, to gain a sense of control over the situation, and to kind of come to terms with, I'm in Jumanji. I am where I am. There's a predator, and I am the prey. And if I just think of it that way, maybe each step along the way will give someone a little bit of encouragement to know they have some hands-on things they can do to kind of take their life back, little at a time, and not bring them down or make them feel bad or guilty or ashamed. And that's definitely the direction I don't want to go.
Well, I really think you said 10%. I would really have thought it was higher than that. We find ourselves being pushed into narcissism anymore, and it seems like everyone has a touch of it in our society. So helping people recognize this is very important. And especially for those breaking up and stepping back into the world, they're vulnerable. They may not even feel that they're vulnerable, but they are vulnerable. They've been out of the dating scene for many, many years, and they get thrust back into it. So there's a lot that people should consider as they re-enter this dating game?
Yes, I call it rewilding yourself. And there's some really quick ways to find out if someone is a narcissist. And I do agree. Selfishness is definitely on the rise. Inconsideration is definitely um, at a level I've never experienced. And but they may not be narcissists, because a narcissist cannot do self reflection. And so there's a few quick things you can just ask someone, especially if you're dating, at that first date or that first meet, that will determine immediately if they're a narcissist or not. And by the way, speed dating there's more narcissists at speed dating than any place else. So if you want to meet one, that's where to go. Yeah, don't speed date. They're the best. They do the best at speed dating is the narcissist. So don't go there. You're probably going to get one. So there's some great ways to just very quickly ask a couple of quick questions. You can't say, "Are you a narcissist?" But if they had been out of a relationship, you can ask them what they learned. How are they different from that relationship? And they will not have learned anything.
Interesting. That's big. A lot of people that are out there talking about narcissistic behavior, they are not identifying those traits like that and saying, look, this is a behavior trait that will give you a higher suspicion count on this individual if this is happening. So to be able to name that and just stop the grouping, because I think you touched a little there, a lot of people get grouped in with narcissists, but they don't have those identifying characteristics. And I think what you outlined there is very important for so many podcasters and media influencers to realize nowadays.
It's true. I mean, someone might be a little narcissistic here and there, but a true narcissist definitely has multiple, internal personalities, and it definitely is detached. There's the psychopaths and sociopaths, and are both narcissists and narcissists. So it's definitely a kind of a disorder, and they're not going to change, and they're not going to get better. Tigers don't change their stripes, kind of thing.
That's right. So when do you suspect this to be released for publication?
Probably not till closer to the end of the year. I know it's May, but like 4 or 5 months. I'm doing a ton of podcasts and starting to do some public speaking on this. But I have to say, I've been pleasantly surprised how many folks have said, "Could you please hurry up the other book?" And I can always add to it. I can always add a chapter.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting because that really outlines what we just said. It's on the rise of being popular discussion topic. So people should actually realize what their topic of discussion really entails instead of just a few character flaws that many of us have. So my wife outlines that a lot to me, and it's really interesting.
Oh, what does she do?
Well, she says there's so many people out there that say that people are narcissists, but they're really not. It's just a character trait that they might be displaying at the time. So this one of those things that we talk about, do you see this? And I think that's vital that people have that open communication about that.
Oh, absolutely. And the other point, like to your wife's discussion, is that someone can truly be a narcissist, but they're not extreme. They haven't taken their narcissism to a psychopathic level, or and so there are those who are more extreme than others, but they still can't answer the same questions, and they're still going to fall to being a victim on everything. that's ever happened in their lives, and they might be very covert and poor, pitiful, poor me, and the one who's on the corner of the room, feeling like he's eyeing everybody out, or they may be the overtly and be, hey, like those car salesman types. Um, but and there's just a different approach. One is a snake, they slither and one is more loud. So there's different type of predators out there. But those are the ones that are definitely the meat eaters that that are going to take you down.
I've enjoyed our conversation today, Barbara. Is there anything that we should add to the conversation?
Gosh, there's so much. I would say that I think other things that are really fun in the book, and I'll just say if anyone's out there and they're interested, some other topics that are discussed are like options to say other than I'm sorry. There's a whole group of options you can say other than I'm sorry, which is probably the most popular, because there are even folks who are grieving who just say, please, I don't want to hear that anymore. I think that's probably one of the biggest, and just like we discussed, ways to be the best person that you can be. And being able to be there for someone else really makes you feel special and makes other people know that, you're a person of character. And so even though we're talking about there are a growing amount of narcissists out there, I think there's a few more people that wouldn't be considered a narcissist if they had just a few little guidelines of what to do or how to get away from folks. It's going to be a better world. We'll make it better, one podcast at a time.
That's what we're out here doing, Barbara. And I can't say thank you enough for sharing here today. Could you tell people how to reach out to you, get involved with you, and how to find your book?
Sure. Well, this book right now, What Not to Do at Funerals, is on Amazon. So they can purchase it there and download it there. They can also go to beauheart.com, which is my business, and it discusses a little bit more about my books and how to contact me at Beauheart. And if they have any suggestions or things they would want to make sure that I put in the book, I would love for them to pass that on to me. So it's either beauheart.com, just like it sounds, Beauheart, or What Not to Do at Funerals will get you all that information.
All right. Well, I enjoyed our conversation today, Barbara. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. If you found this podcast enlightening, entertaining, educational in any way, please share, like, subscribe, and join us right back here next week for another great episode of the Dead America Podcast. I'm Ed Waters, your host. Enjoy your afternoon, wherever you might be.